Amidst the majestic Carpathian Mountains lay a small village called Villa Lupular, home to the illustrious Silvestru family. Giuseppe Silvestru, head of the clan, was a renowned businessman whose empire stretched all the way to Bucharest. His wife, Larissa, was a strikingly beautiful woman with a slender figure and a sharp, formidable presence, determined to maintain her family's prestige at any cost. They had a single son, Adrian, now 5 years old, with dark, wide eyes, but he had never spoken a single word. From the moment Adrian was born, he refused to utter anything, choosing instead to watch the world around him with cautious, curious eyes. Villagers whispered that he must be deaf or mentally challenged, and his parents seemed less than sympathetic. Whenever a servant called, "Adrian, eat your breakfast, dear," he simply shook his head and remained silent, his gaze betraying a deep sorrow. Larissa insisted that he be sent to the city for psychiatric treatment, certain that a specialist would fix him. Yet every doctor they consulted concluded that Adrian had no physical impairments, only psychological ones, born from fear and a lack of parental affection. Those words enraged Larissa even more. She branded anyone who dared to disagree as incompetent. At last, in July, Giuseppe and Larissa announced they would take Adrian on a trip to a remote mountain cabin, claiming it would heal his spirit, when in reality they meant to isolate him, hoping he would somehow change, or else be sent away permanently. Their Mercedes wound up narrow mountain roads, flanked by towering pines shrouded in mist. They told Adrian he was going on a scenic vacation, hoping a picturesque mountaintop might cure him of his muteness. When they arrived at a rickety cabin covered in moss and lichen, Larissa thrust a handmade woolen sweater into his arms, blaring that "You'll be here, we'll pick you up tomorrow." Before he could protest, the back door of the car closed, and his parents' silhouettes vanished into the swirling fog. Adrian stood frozen on the narrow dirt clearing, his heartbeat thundering in his ears, watching them drive away as tears traced silent paths down his cheeks. In that moment, he understood he had been abandoned. Even as night fell, Adrian could not utter a sound. He whispered, "Parents. Left me." To the silent trees. The cabin's interior was dark and empty, a dusty bed, tattered blankets, and rotten apples scattered beneath a small desk. Outside, the wind moaned through the pines, as if mocking him. The world had become a vast, echoing void. He forced himself inside the cabin, shivering in the cold, and collapsed onto the fraying blanket. Alone in the mountains, he finally let his tears flow. The stormy night rumbled on, and in the distance, he thought he heard something rustling through the leaf litter. Petrified, he clutched the thin blanket as a dark shape emerged, a wolf with silvery gray fur and piercing amber eyes. The wolf approached cautiously, sniffing at Adrian's wool sweater. Instead of snarling, it lowered itself to the ground, eyeing him curiously. More wolves, pups and adults, slid from between the trees, forming a circle around him. Though he wanted to run, he felt rooted to the spot as their warm, golden eyes studied him. He reached out a trembling hand, as though seeking some reassurance that he wasn't alone. The lead wolf, Silver, nuzzled his hand gently, as if accepting him into their circle. They settled around him, providing a protective barrier, and Adrian rested his head against Silver's soft, warm side. In that silent communion, for the first time since his birth, he felt a spark of belonging. At dawn, Adrian woke to Silver's breath steaming in the cold morning air. The pack had caught a rabbit the night before. They offered him the tenderest cuts of meat, which he hesitated over but could not refuse. It was his first meal in days. From that day forward, Adrian lived among the wolves, learning their ways, how to move silently through leaf-strewn paths, how to track prey, how to howl the pack's calls into the mountain wind. Silver taught him how to use his heightened senses, to read the sky for weather changes, sniff out hidden streams, and heed the slightest warning tremor in the underbrush. In return, Adrian protected them when a roaming bear attacked or when fierce winds pounded their hidden den. He was no longer a helpless boy, he had become part of something larger. Though he savored this new family, a small ember of longing for human connection burned deep in his heart. On moonlit nights, he would gaze at the stars and whisper, "One day, I will find someone who loves me." From age 10 to 15, Adrian transformed into a lithe, muscular young man. His hair, tangled with leaves and twigs, hung in dark waves over his forehead. His skin bore a tough, sun-kissed bronze from years of roaming the high forests. Silver, whose fur was now tipped with frostwhite, remained his mentor and friend. Each morning, Silver would show Adrian how to move like the wind, pressing his bare footfalls onto mossy earth, avoiding fallen branches and the crackle that would give away their presence. He learned to track deer into narrow clearings where the pack could encircle them. He learned to listen for the distant rumble of a predator or the faint rustle of a hidden flock. Years of hunting taught him to rely on instincts. When a black bear's odor drifted on a breeze, he would warn the pack. If a sudden snap of a branch heralded danger, he would lead them to safety. In return, the wolves taught him their language of growls and whines, howling into the moonlit sky as one united voice. With every passing season, he grew stronger, more confident, until he stood shoulder to shoulder with Silver, leading hunts and guiding the pack across steep ridges and roaring streams. Yet even as the mountains embraced him, his human side ached. In dreams, he heard his birth mother's lullaby, soft and distant, "Sleep, my darling, sleep." He would wake and whisper, "Mother," only to be greeted by the howling wind. The wolves comforted him in their own way, but the haunting longing for human love remained. When Adrian turned 16, he had the lean physique of a mountain goat, the reflexes of a panther, and eyes that had known heartbreak and solitude. One cool autumn morning, as a mist hovered above a narrow mountain stream, a father-daughter pair ventured into his territory. Michael Harper, a 45-year-old English physician turned wandering herbalist, led the way with an eye for rare medicinal plants. His daughter, Eliza Harper, was a 16-year-old with sunlit blonde curls and icy blue eyes reminiscent of Scotland's Loch Inverness. She clutched a leather-bound copy of Herbum Carpathianus and walked with a grace that belied her calm curiosity. As they paused near the water's edge, Michael bent to inspect strange hoofprints in the mud, massive, clawed prints unlike any deer or boar. "Eliza," he murmured, "those are wolf tracks. The pack still roams here, but they usually avoid humans. If someone tried to steal their kill, they'd retaliate fiercely." Eliza nodded, her gaze following his. Suddenly, Michael's eyes widened at a deep growl emanating from the shadows. Before he could react, a massive bear burst forth, its hackles raised, aiming straight for him. Eliza shouted, "Father!" And he spun to face the beast, wincing as its massive paw struck his shoulder. At that instant, a dark figure streaked through the trees. A tall, muscular youth in a tangle of furs charged at the bear with a blunt wooden stake, inserting it between the creature's ribs. The bear roared and swatted him, but the youth, guided by instincts honed over years with the wolves, struck again and again, until the bear, wounded and startled by the onslaught, lumbered away. Behind the rescuer, a pack of wolves emerged, their fierce eyes keeping the bear at bay until it finally fled into the pines. Michael collapsed to the ground, wincing in pain. He managed to whisper, "Thank you, young man. You saved us." Eliza stumbled forward, brushing dirt and blood from the stranger's grime-streaked face. Fear and astonishment flickered in her gaze. You're like a wolf yourself," she gasped. He flinched, then met her eyes and said, hoarsely, "I'm fine." Michael, trying to hide his agony, gingerly touched his wounded shoulder. "I am a herbalist. My daughter and I were gathering medicinal plants. Would you allow us to accompany you back to your home? We need to treat this wound." The boy paused, glancing at the wolves arrayed behind him, then at Michael's pained expression. Slowly, he nodded, muttering, "I live nearby." In that moment, the wolves gave a chorus of low howls as though pledging protection. Thus began Adrian's first step back toward human society. When they arrived at a small wooden cottage hidden at the forest's edge, it seemed almost an extension of the wilderness, vines crawling up the logs, wild flowers encircling the threshold. Adrian motioned for them to enter. Inside, his home was austere, a single wooden bed, a stool, and a rough-hewn table with a few worn blankets. He allowed Michael to tend to his shoulder wound with poultices of crushed goldenrod and mint. Eliza placed a cool vine-wrapped compress against the boy's cheek. Later, under the dim glow of an oil lamp, Michael scribbled the words hungry? Thirsty? Need anything? On a scrap of paper and held it out to Adrian, hoping for a response. The boy stared for a long moment, then simply drew a small heart and the shape of a wolf on the paper. Eliza interpreted, a gentle smile on her lips, he cares for wolves more than anything. He is safe with us. The boy looked from Eliza's compassionate eyes to Michael's kind gaze and finally scrawled Adrian. At that moment, both Michael and Eliza felt their hearts swell with compassion. Here was a young man who had lived apart in the wilderness, yet still retained a spark of hope. Adrian stayed at the cottage, resting on a narrow wooden bed. His first meal was a simple loaf of bread and bowls of berry-infused water Eliza brought, but he could barely swallow it. Michael applied more herbal salves to his shoulder as he explained, through slow, careful speech, that they were grateful for saving their lives. Adrian responded with a trembling, "I am okay," his pale voice barely rising above a whisper. Eliza offered him paper and pen each day, writing single words, mother, father, water, courage, thank you, and patiently guiding him as he struggled to repeat them aloud, Mo there. Ma. He paused, embarrassed, as tears welled in his eyes. She gently nudged him, take your time. I believe you can speak. Over the course of a week, he managed to murmur complete phrases, Eliza. Thank you. The day he finally said, thirsty, they celebrated as though he had learned to conjure miraculous magic. Michael produced a worn journal, opened to pages in Larissa's handwriting. He is strange, doesn't talk, doesn't smile. We engaged several doctors, but with no results. Best to take him to the mountains for rest. On the following page, she left him in the depths of the forest. He will never survive. A grievous mistake. Eliza read the words out loud, her voice cracking. Adrian's lips trembled as he whispered, Mother. Left. Me. Eliza wrapped her arms around him, holding him in a warm embrace, murmuring, I will never leave you. He stared at her, seeing compassion he had never known, tears streaming down his cheeks. After a month under the gentle guidance of Sister Katerina at the mountain convent, Adrian emerged transformed in both voice and spirit. Michael suggested they return to Villa Lupular so he could see his maternal grandmother, Sylvia, once again. On a crisp morning with sunlight filtering through golden leaves, the trio approached the village entrance. People paused their chores, washing laundry by the stream, children tossing fallen alder leaves at one another, to stare. Whispers rippled through the onlookers, it's the wolf boy. As they neared the cemetery gate, they spotted a frail, white-haired woman stepping onto the porch of a small manor she once shared with Larissa. She spotted Adrian and gasped, tears welling in her eyes. Adrian. You've returned. And you can speak. Adrian lifted his chin and offered a soft, grandmother. The old woman rushed forward, brushing away the tears in his hair, hugging him tightly. Neighbors gathered, whispering, he speaks. He looks like a youth now. Michael escorted him to the mayor's office that afternoon, where Mayor Ion Popescu handed him a certificate, Welcome, Adrian Silvestru, to Volksschule. Adrian blinked, perplexed, School? Ion smiled warmly, Yes. You will learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and history like other children. Eliza squeezed his hand, whispering, You will be my classmate. On his first day in class, Adrian steadied himself and said with effort, Hello. Teacher. And classmates. The classroom fell silent, then erupted in applause. Some students looked on with fear or suspicion. Nicoletta pulled me aside, sneering, "He's a wild creature. I heard he once attacked the Popescu farm's chickens." Victor, the class bully, hurled a piece of chalk in his direction. "Go back to the forest, wolf." Adrian suppressed the urge to shrink away. Instead, he calmly rose, walked over, and said, "Apologize. To me." The room froze. Victor's face flushed scarlet, he averted his eyes. Eliza leaped up and declared, "He is my friend. Leave him alone." The students exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to respond. At the end of the day, Eliza led Adrian to the stream bank where they often met. She whispered, "You are amazing. You didn't have to fight, but you did so with dignity." He looked at the rippling water, then offered, "Thank you, Eliza." They smiled at one another in the soft, fading light. Adrian's reintegration into village life was not without turbulence. Rumors of the Carpathian wolf boy circulated in hushed tones. Late one night, a trio of local youths crept toward his cottage, brandishing clubs to force him out. One shouted, "Show yourself, beast." Eliza intercepted them, shouting, "Don't touch him. He's a human being." The attackers hesitated, then reluctantly backed off under Michael's stern glare. "I will involve the authorities if you harass him further." The next morning, Michael and his daughter escorted Adrian to the convent again. "He needs more guidance," Michael said gently. The convent was a serene place by a clear stream, with a climbing rose wreathing around the door. Sister Katerina greeted them, placing a gentle hand on Adrian's shoulder. "I know of your hardships. I will help you gain confidence and refine your speech." Inside, in the hush of candlelight, she instructed him in breathing exercises, paying attention to his heartbeat, focusing on his voice as a bridge to the human world. Night after night, Adrian practiced syllable patterns in the dim glow of a single candle until he could say, "I am Adrian." Adrian's days at the convent grew brighter as Sister Katerina took him to the herb garden each morning to harvest sage, mint, and rose petals for tea. A small, crystal-clear pond lay at the garden's edge, the water so still it mirrored the sky. During dawn, the pond shimmered with gold and pink sunlight. One morning, Sister Katerina led him to a hill overlooking the convent. From there, he could see the red-roofed chapel, ivy crawling up its walls, and the distant white peaks of Carpathian summits beyond. She said softly, "This world can be so beautiful. You are not alone." Adrian gazed at the horizon, his heart lifting. "I want to stay here forever," he whispered. At midday, Sister Katerina gave him 2 new books, an English primer and a collection of Romanian folk tales. As she read to him a story about a lost boy aided by a forest spirit, Adrian listened intently, his eyes tracing the dancing embers in the hearth. When she imitated the forest spirit's lullaby, "Still forest, silent night, guide this soul toward the light," Adrian felt a sudden stirring in his throat. With a shaky voice, he said, "I like this story." Sister Katerina smiled and coaxed him, "Then tell me, I like this story." After several attempts, he managed, "I like this story." Eliza, who had come to visit, cried out in delight, "You said a full sentence. You speak." His face burned with gratitude and relief. Over the next weeks, he learned to say phrases like "Mother, I am hungry," and "Father, I am in pain." Eliza would bring him pastries and lavender tea, telling him of her dream to become a Western-trained doctor to help children with disabilities. One afternoon, Adrian told her, "I miss the wolves." Her eyes glistened. "You have me, and your wolves, to rely on." Adrian placed a hand over his heart. "Thank you." After a month at the convent, Adrian felt prepared to return to Villa Lupular. One golden morning, Eliza walked alongside him, carrying a bowl of oatmeal. "Today, we will visit your grandmother," she said softly. At the word grandmother, his heart lurched. Memories of Grandma Sylvia's gentle hands returning flickered through his mind. At the cottage's door, he hesitated. I'm scared, he admitted. Eliza squeezed his hand. I'm here with you. He nodded, stepping forward resolutely. As they approached the gated entrance, villagers paused their daily routines. At the manor at the lane's end, Grandma Sylvia saw her grandson and wept with joy. My precious boy. You can speak now. Adrian shyly offered, Grandmother. A hush fell over the onlookers. Mayor Ion Popescu arrived to greet him, presenting an official certificate. Adrian Silvestru, welcome to village school. Adrian blinked. School? The mayor laughed warmly. Yes, you will learn reading and arithmetic. Eliza beamed. You'll sit next to me in class. On his first day, Adrian stood before the chalkboard and said haltingly, Hello, teacher and classmates. The students applauded. Yet not everyone was supportive. Nicoletta, whispering to her friend, teased, He's a wild man. I heard he once attacked the Popescu farm's chickens. Victor the bully hurled chalk at Adrian, sneering, Go back to the forest, wolf. But Adrian calmly rose, walked over, and said, Apologize to me. The room erupted in stunned silence, and Victor's eyes dropped to the floor. Eliza jumped up. He saved my father's life. Leave him be. Gradually, whispers of admiration spread. He's full of surprises, and perhaps he's more human than we thought. That afternoon, Eliza and Adrian strolled beside the stream. The water ran clear over smooth stones, and golden light filtered through the leaves. You did well. You didn't have to be so brave, Eliza said. Adrian looked at the ripples in the water and offered, Thank you, Eliza. They exchanged a gentle smile as the sun dipped lower, closing another chapter of his journey. Winter descended abruptly upon the Carpathian foothills, blanketing the forest in deep, drifting snow. Adrian had spent the previous year splitting his time between the village and living with his wolf family at night. One morning, after a heavy snowfall, he hurried into the woods to check on them, fearing they might not have survived. Clutching a torch, he stumbled through waist-deep drifts until he found their den, a hollow beneath an overhanging ledge. There, he discovered Silver, Luna, Blaze, and the others huddled together, shivering and weak. Suddenly, a chunk of ice and rock gave way above the den's entrance, blocking the only escape route. The wolves whimpered in panic as the temperature inside the cramped space dropped further. Adrian's heart pounded. He dropped to his knees, thrusting his arms through gaps in the debris to dig a tunnel. His hands grew numb, and a shard of ice wounded his shoulder. As the tunnel expanded, Silver's heavy breathing rumbled in the darkness. Finally, with a final heave, Adrian freed a narrow path. He shepherded each wolf through one by one, Silver first, limping onto Adrian's back, then Luna and Blaze. They emerged at the forest edge as the wind howled around them, tossing snow like a furious tide. Eliza, Michael, and Sister Katerina were waiting, their faces etched with worry. They helped Adrian carry Silver back to the cottage, where they dressed his wounds and fed the exhausted pack bowls of warming broth made from heated herb tea. Adrian wept, stroking Silver's fur as the old wolf looked up with gentle eyes that said, Thank you, my friend. Over the next week, Michael and Eliza nursed the wolves back to health, applying salves and honeyed mixtures to their sores. One by one, Silver, Luna, and Blaze regained strength, and soon the entire pack ventured outside to drink from the clear, thawing stream, proof that care and compassion, even in the cruelest weather, could work miracles. News of Adrian's rescue of his pack spread through Villa Lupular. Mayor Ion Popescu christened him the soul of the Carpathians, praising his bravery. Villagers who once feared him now spoke his name with respect. He sacrificed himself for those wolves. He must truly be one of the forest. With spring's arrival, the Carpathians bloomed in waves of white cherry blossoms and purple violets. Adrian's life now balanced between civilization and wilderness. Photographers from Bucharest arrived, eager to capture images of the wolf boy leading his pack through the forest at dawn. One journalist asked, Do you ever want to return to your parents in Bucharest? Adrian shook his head firmly. I will never go back. Intrigued, the reporter pressed, What do you want, then? Adrian looked toward the mountains where the wolves roamed, and softly replied, I want to stay with Eliza. And my wolves. That evening, the village held a festival of poppies. Lanterns glowed among the blossoming fields as villagers sang and danced around a roaring bonfire. From the ridge above, wolves gathered in the shadows, their howls rising in concert with the music, as though joining in celebration. Eliza sang a traditional Romanian song, Floria Mea, her voice clear and pure. Adrian stood beside her, mesmerized. Your voice. It's like an angel's. Eliza blushed. You sang with the wolves for so long, now sing with me. As she reached for his hand, he took a trembling breath and opened his mouth to sing. Though his voice was raw, it carried warmth, melding with hers beneath the starlit sky. Wolves howled softly in the distance, as if their music was a blessing. Summer faded into the golden days of late summer. Adrian found new purpose, teaching local Romani children how to paint the animals of the forest. Each Saturday, he led them into the woods, showing them how to recognize deer tracks, wolf trails, and identify medicinal plants. Their small hands clutched paintbrushes as they mixed forest greens and twilight purples, capturing a wolf pack encircling its leader, always centered on Adrian himself. One girl whispered, When I grow up, I want to be just like you. Adrian knelt beside her and gently replied, I was once afraid, too. Just remember to love and trust. Meanwhile, Petru, the village blacksmith, asked Adrian to help fix a bicycle that had rusted in the barn. Michael thought it a strange request. Did a wolf boy truly know machines? Yet Adrian disassembled the bike's wheel, oiled the joints, and reassembled it with nimble precision. Petru's jaw dropped. You're a natural. Adrian shrugged. I just want to help. His generosity, whether teaching or mending, helped heal many prejudices. One evening, under the glow of lanterns among bantam roses, Eliza and Adrian ventured up to the ruins of an ancient monastery hidden in a forest glade. Briars and grapevines wound around crumbling walls dating back 3 centuries. Adrian turned to Eliza and said, I want to rebuild this as a memorial. To us and the wolves. She squeezed his hand, tears in her eyes. I am so proud of you. As they stared at the shattered stones and tangled ivy, the setting sun cast a pink haze over the valley, promising new beginnings. Though life had grown sweeter, a shadow of jealousy still lingered. In the village square, a woman in a flowing black cloak stood near the old birch tree. She was Bianca Petrescu, a celebrated poet who had returned for a season. Spotting Adrian with Eliza, she called out, He's just a forest savage pretending to be a boy. Don't be fooled by his words. Eliza bristled. He saved my father's life. He is kind, not a savage. Bianca sneered. The wolves have turned him wild. Trust him at your own peril. Within hours, sensational headlines splashed across the local newspapers. Carpathian wolf boy threatens villagers. Tourists cancelled their trips. The valley's inns grew quiet. A group of bristling youths, emboldened by fear, marched with clubs toward Michael's cottage. We'll chase him out. They shouted. Eliza stood firm, rushing to Adrian's side, tears streaming. He saved my father. He is not dangerous. Adrian's voice quavered. I only protect my pack. Mayor Ion Popescu convened a town meeting in the tiny wooden council hall lit by dim lanterns. We cannot let fear override compassion, he declared. Adrian has done so much to help this village. Let him live in peace. Some village elders protested, fearful that the wolves would attack their flocks. Better to be safe, they argued. Eliza rose, trembling but resolute. I'm his friend. He is kind. He has never harmed anyone. Michael stepped forward. I am a doctor. He is of sound mind and helpful heart. After heated debate, the council voted to protect Adrian, so long as his wolves remained outside village boundaries. Adrian bowed his head. I will obey. Outside, Villagers nodded and murmured among themselves. At twilight, Adrian slipped into the forest, calling softly, "Silver." The sound of distant howls answered him, a reunion with his true family. The wolves emerged from the shadowed trees, their pelts matted but bodies strong. Silver nuzzled his cheek, whiny yet comforting. Adrian whispered, "I feared they would send you away." Silver's eyes, wise and ancient, seemed to reply, "We are always yours." With that reassurance, Adrian returned to the village with renewed confidence. As summer's warmth deepened, Adrian and Eliza resolved to scale Turku, the revered peak of the Carpathians. At dawn, they packed leather satchels with dried bread, herb bundles, woolen cloaks, and a tattered map that Michael had procured from an old local scholar, Nikolai. A small cadre of wolves trotted alongside them, parting the brambles to reveal a narrow spur path that wound into the mountains. The ascent through the Retezat forest was arduous. Ancient lime trees towered overhead, their bark mottled with moss, and clusters of purple wildflowers lined the shimmering streams. Adrian led the way, stepping carefully over root tangles and slick stones, occasionally offering Eliza a reassuring hand as she navigated the terrain. At midday, they pitched a small tent on a plateau near a frothing cascade. The wind screamed through the pines, threatening to tear their shelter apart. Adrian braced the tent poles and wrapped Eliza in a thick cloak, standing guard while she trembled in the biting air. By dawn's light, they resumed their climb up a steep, rocky incline. Each step threatened to send them sliding into shadowed hollows below. Yet with each handhold and foothold, they rose higher. At last, the world opened before them, a crescent plateau at the summit of Turku, bordered by a ring of jagged stones. Below lay the Carpathian foothills, a patchwork of conifer forests and clearings full of white blossoms. A pale mist clung to distant ridges, and for a moment, the world felt suspended. Eliza seized Adrian's hand, tears of wonder in her eyes. "I've never seen anything so magnificent." He smiled, his chest throbbing with joy. "I'm glad you're here." Together, they planted 3 flags atop a weathered cairn, one bearing Romania's tricolour, one for England's Union Jack, and one emblazoned with a silver wolf's head. Above them, a lone golden eagle soared in circles, as if the mountains themselves were celebrating. The cold mountain wind whipped at their clothes, carrying their hopeful hearts into a new dawn. Returning from Turku, Adrian felt a profound sense of purpose. Mayor Ion Popescu proposed that he establish a weekly workshop at the village school on Carpathian natural history, teaching children and curious adults about the forest's wildlife. Every Tuesday afternoon, he guided a small group through the pine needles and leaf litter, pointing out deer tracks, identifying rare herbs, and explaining the wolves' vital role in maintaining ecological balance. Children painted colorful scenes on cardboard, wolves howling at the moon, deer grazing under birch trees, and admired Adrian's own sketches, which captured every fir tuft and thunderous footfall. One day, the village's blacksmith, Uncle Petru, invited Adrian to help restore an old farm wagon's broken axle. Skeptical that the wolf boy could do mechanical work, Petru handed him a rusted wrench and walked away. Adrian knelt, stripped away layers of petrified dirt from the axle's gears, applied charcoal-based lubricant, and tightened each bolt with deft precision. Petru gasped, "You know how to fix it." Adrian simply said, "I learned to solve problems." Petru shook his head in awe, "You're a wonder, boy." On a balmy summer evening, festival lanterns glowed along narrow lanes as townsfolk danced to fiddles and accordions. Adrian and Eliza strolled hand in hand through the scented lanes of poppies and wheat. "I feel so happy," Eliza whispered. "I love you more than anything," Adrian replied, his eyes shining. She leaned in, pressing her lips to his cheek as twigs of lavender brushed their path. In the distance, wolves gathered at the forest's edge, their silhouettes etched against the moonlit sky. Their low howls echoed like a blessing over the village, a reminder that compassion and courage can bridge even the widest divides. 2 years had passed. Adrian, now 18, was a young man of quiet strength, equal parts boy and wolf. By night, he still roamed the hidden trails with Silver, Luna, and Blaze. By day, he was a fixture at the village school, teaching his weekly animal ecology workshops and volunteering at the medical tent to help Michael treat minor wounds with herbal poultices. One scorching July day, a mysterious illness swept through the pack. Silver lay propped against a mossy rock, eyes half closed in pain. Luna and Blaze whimpered at her side, their fur matted with mud and sweat. Adrian's heart pounded as he rushed to the old cottage's trial treatment room. He begged Michael, "Please, help them." Michael drew a vial of bear serum he had developed last year to treat severe infections. Eliza gathered fresh blooms of St. John's wort, yarrow, and burdock root from the garden. For 3 days and nights, the three worked in shifts, administering serum injections, applying salves, and holding the wolves close to keep them calm. "Hang on, Silver," Adrian murmured as he bathed her fevered brow with cool rag. Each wolf's labored breath echoed through the walls. On the 4th morning, Silver let out a low, relieved sigh, lifting her head to meet Adrian's tear-filled gaze. Luna and Blaze trembled but stood stronger, a sign their strength was returning. Adrian sank to his knees in tears, pressing his forehead to Silver's matted fur. "Thank you," he whispered, though her golden eyes spoke louder, "your devotion saved us." Word of Adrian's heroic care for his pack spread once more. Families who once eyed him with suspicion now gathered outside the cottage, bringing jars of honey and baskets of fresh fruit for his wolves. Mayor Ion declared a village holiday to celebrate the preservation of the pack. Adrian and Eliza stood together on the dais as villagers applauded, and even skeptics offered nods of respect. That fall, Adrian inaugurated a monthly forest stewardship initiative, leading children and parents alike on guided hikes beneath ancient oaks to plant saplings, collect wild seeds, and learn respectful coexistence with wildlife. He showed them how to set up safe beehives, cultivate medicinal herb gardens, and keep a respectful distance from predator dens. His workshops brimmed with laughter, curiosity, and the lively chatter of children eager to follow his every step. At dusk on a crisp October eve, Adrian and Eliza walked to the top of a small ridge behind the old monastery. A stone archway, half swallowed by vines, stood among gnarled grapevines that had entwined themselves over centuries. Beneath the arch, a hollowed sarcophagus once held the bones of long-forgotten monks. Now, the alcove was dry and empty, awaiting restoration. Adrian turned to Eliza, dusted ivy from his thick wool coat, and said, "I want to rebuild this monastery into a sanctuary, both for our history and for the wolves." Eliza's eyes glistened. "I'd love to help," she whispered as she linked her arm through his. The two stood amid flickering lanterns, old parchment maps fluttering in the wind. A single shooting star streaked across the violet sky, as though offering a silent blessing to their shared dream. In the soft glow of an autumn sunrise, the Carpathian foothills shimmered with dew-laden grasses. Butterflies drifted over fields where orange and red leaves had begun to blanket the ground. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wild flowers through Villa Lupular. Adrian Silvestru, once a silent boy abandoned in a remote mountaintop cabin, stood at the edge of the old monastery ruins, now under reconstruction. Next to him was Eliza Harper, her hair a cascade of gold in the dawn's pink light. Behind them gathered Silver, Luna, Blaze, and the rest of the wolf pack, their fur sleek after weeks of recovery. On them assembled townspeople, from children clutching fresh paintbrushes to the elderly bearing baskets of fragrant herbs. Mayor Ion Popescu, standing at a simple podium of stacked stones, addressed the crowd. "Today we celebrate not just a rebuilt monastery, but the bond between humanity and nature, brought together by a remarkable young man." The villagers broke into applause. Across the clearing, Michael Harper smiled, tears glistening in his eyes as he watched Adrian hug Silver's muzzle, their friendship older than memory. Eliza stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Adrian's waist. "You've made this world so much more beautiful," she whispered. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Because of you, and them," he said, gesturing to the wolves. Silver raised her head and let out a gentle howl that echoed like a hymn across the valley. As the sun rose higher, its golden rays illuminated a new mosaic, the restored monastery walls gleaming in crisp stone, children scattering wildflower seeds, and the wolves reclining peacefully on the hillside. In that harmonious tableau, fear and prejudice had dissolved. What remained was love, trust, and gratitude. Adrian lifted his voice in a soft, lilting melody, a song of belonging, survival, and hope. "I sing of love that knows no fear. Within the wolf's faithful embrace, where dreams were once lost in the night, now dawn shines with gentle grace." Eliza rested her head against his, and together they listened to the wolves' resonant howls. In that moment, the Carpathian Mountains held their breath, acknowledging that this boy, once abandoned, once silent, had found his voice, his family, and his purpose. And so, under the golden promise of a new day, Villa Lupola rejoiced in the dawn of a future woven from tears and smiles, where the heart of one young man had bridged two worlds forever.